Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Legacy. My name's Noah Mitchell and I'm the Senior Learning Experience Designer here at Legacy FM. So you've probably heard the term imposter syndrome before, right? In fact, it's been a really hot topic, and I think the reason for that is that more people than would like to admit it have suffered from this or still do. I'm definitely one of those people. So you see, my whole life, I've struggled with my attention, my focus, my confidence, you name it, really. And unfortunately, imposter syndrome, well, breeds around those sorts of issues. So what I want to share with you today is just one way in which I try to combat my imposter syndrome, okay? So when I started working as an instructional designer or learning experience designer here at Legacy FM, I had a lot of stress. I'd never worked for a startup before. I'd never worked really in instructional design before, so it was really a new frontier for me. So you can imagine that very quickly imposter syndrome started to creep in. Honestly, because my confidence was already kind of rocky. I was trying to figure out, how to do the best job that I could do. And so very quickly you start to feel that way, like, I'm not doing a good job. The stuff I'm creating just isn't good enough. And actually that right there, that's the big one, right? Always, no matter what, I was so hard on myself for the courses that I created. And I would do the best that I could, but more often than not, I would just get stuck. I would get stuck in the resources. I would get stuck in trying to think of, man, what's the best thing I can do here? And to be honest, furthermore, oftentimes that was because the interactions that I wanted to create were either too complex for what I was able to do in that time period, or I just couldn't think of anything at all. And I'm like, well, I don't want it to be super basic either. So that created an issue because that imposter syndrome, that feeling of like, man, they're going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing. Even though I honestly did, it was just a matter of skill level. I'd been doing that less than a year at that point, right? So that was a really big issue for me. One way that I went about combating that, though, was after reading Adam Grant's book, Originals. And if you haven't read that yet, I would definitely recommend it. It's a really good book. But one thing or some research that he cites in that book that really resonated with me was this section where he was saying, researchers were trying to figure out what makes people original really? Like, what traits do original thinkers have? And so they even looked at some of the most famous originals throughout history, like Shakespeare, Beethoven, and the like. And so what they found was that, of course, you have to have a talent for it, right? There's always sort of like that talent component, but I would argue that a lot of people have enough talent in a lot of different areas that they can make it. But what really seemed to be the distinguishing factor was that they just kept creating. So Beethoven, for example, I think they use Shakespeare. So Shakespeare, for example, they look at all of his masterpieces, what we consider masterpieces today. And it's really a drop in the bucket compared to how many pieces he created overall, right? And so then it really turns into a statistics game, right? The fact that Shakespeare was good at what he did, but simply kept creating, and I imagine in his sake, for the sake of creating, because that was his passion, that was what he had to do. He had to get the words out. Eventually, he just created something that everybody loved, and it was a masterpiece. So I adopted that mindset for myself. I started to get to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm going to do the best that I can, and it's going to have to be okay. I can't hold the whole weight of the world on my shoulders just because I want to do something, but I can't accomplish it yet. And so I started to adopt this virtue, I suppose, or this rule really, of just keep creating. No matter what, each step, little by little, if you just keep creating, if you keep adding little pieces to your portfolio, if you keep just creating interaction after interaction, I promise you that your masterpieces will come. And more importantly, so will your mastery. So I hope that helps any of you. I'm still a work in progress, and I'll be 100% honest about that. But I know that if you can just get over the fact that you think you have to be perfect and just create, it's going to do wonders for you. Anyway, that's all for now. We'll see you next time.